They give you a uniform on your first day and very little else. A radio that crackles more than it communicates. A post number. A shift schedule printed on paper that's already been handled by a dozen other hands. Nobody shakes yours. Nobody learns your name in the first week, not your supervisors, not the other guards, and certainly not the man whose life you've technically been assigned to protect. You are, in every meaningful sense, invisible. And in this line of work, you'll come to understand that invisible is exactly what they want you to be. The compound is enormous. You knew it would be, but knowing and seeing are different things. There are walls within walls, gates that require different clearances, corridors that lead to other corridors, gardens that nobody walks in. You are stationed at a checkpoint near the eastern vehicle entrance, far from the residence, far from anything that actually matters. Your job is to check credentials, log arrivals, and wave through the black. Convoys that come and go at hours that don't follow any pattern you can figure out. You stop trying to figure it out by the end of the second week. The other guards are not unfriendly, but they're not warm either. There's a particular kind of communication that develops in places like this, efficient, stripped of anything personal, careful. Men talk about football, about food, about how hot it gets in the afternoon on the eastern post versus the northern one. They do not talk about what they've seen. They do not talk about what they think. You pick this up without anyone having to explain it. It is simply the atmosphere of the place, and the atmosphere gets into you whether you want it to or not. Your supervisor is a man named Damir. He has the eyes of someone who has been here long enough that surprise is no longer available to him as an emotion. He runs through your briefing on the first day in under 4 minutes. Protocols, radio codes, escalation procedures, when to call up chain, when to handle something yourself. When in this one he emphasizes with a pause to pretend you didn't see anything. You almost ask him to clarify that last point. You decide not to. The pause itself was the clarification. The weeks go by. You find the rhythms. 5 a.m. shift starts when the air still has cold in it. The convoy protocols. The way the senior guards move differently at certain times of day, tighter, quieter, which you eventually work out corresponds to when he is moving through the compound. You still haven't seen him. Not really. A shape through tinted glass once maybe, when a car slowed near your post and then accelerated again. It might have been him. It might have been a colonel. Nobody confirmed either way, and you knew better than to ask. Then something happens that recalibrates everything. A guard named Tobok, quiet guy. 2 posts down from yours. Been here about 8 months longer than you, disappears one Tuesday. Not dramatically. Not with any scene or confrontation. He's simply there on Monday, and not there on Tuesday, and his name has been removed from the schedule, and his locker has been cleared out with a neatness that suggests this was planned rather than sudden. You ask one of the other guards, carefully, what happened to Tobok? The guard looks at you, not with hostility, with something more like pity. He says Tobok was transferred. He says it the way you'd say a word in a language you don't speak correctly, but without any belief in it. You go home that night and lie on your bed, and stare at the ceiling for a long time. You think about the things you know. You think about the things you've chosen not to think about. You think about Tobok's face, which was ordinary, forgettable. A face that caused no trouble and asked for none. You think about the 3 a.m. convoys that come back lighter than they left, and the officers who laugh a little too quickly at things he says, and the section of the eastern garden that the groundskeepers avoid. You line all of these things up in your head and then you put them away. You close the drawer. You have a family, you have a salary, you have a post number and a shift schedule and a radio that crackles. The outer ring teaches you one thing above everything else. Proximity to power is not the same as having it. You are close enough to the machine to be crushed by it. You are not close enough to understand it, influence it, or escape it cleanly. You are a part of it in the way that a bolt is a part of a bridge, structural, replaceable, unaware of what the bridge is actually carrying. Every morning you put on the uniform and take your post, and watch the gates and tell yourself that the wall between you and whatever is happening inside is a form of protection. Maybe it is. Maybe the distance is the only mercy available here. Maybe the men who get promoted, the ones who get pulled inward, who get closer to him, maybe they are not the lucky ones. Maybe you don't want that. Maybe you should stop doing your job well enough to be noticed. Maybe you should be just good enough to stay exactly where you are at the edge, at the perimeter, watching the walls and never ever looking inside. But they notice you anyway. They always notice the ones who are paying attention, even when those ones are trying their hardest not to show it. Damir calls you into his office on a Thursday afternoon. and tells you that you're being moved closer in, different responsibilities, a different clearance level. He says it like it's an honor. His face says nothing. You say thank you. You go back to your post and finish your shift, and that night you don't sleep at all, and you're not entirely sure if what you're feeling is pride or the very first tremor of something that, if you were being honest with yourself, you would have to call dread. The first thing you notice is the smell, not a bad smell, that's almost what makes it worse. Expensive fabric, cold air pushed through systems that hum quietly in the walls. The particular stillness of a space where the wrong sound could ruin your week. You've been inside the residence corridor for 11 minutes on your first day in the inner detail, and you are already aware that every cell in your body is operating on a different frequency than it was an hour ago. You are not patrolling a perimeter anymore. You are standing 6 feet from the center of something, and the center is a different country entirely. He is smaller than you expected. This is the first thing everyone notices and no one ever says. The men who run things really run things. The ones whose decisions detonate across other people's lives, they are almost never what the portraits suggest. The portraits are painted for the outside world. In person he is compact, deliberate, unhurried in the way that only people who have never once had to wait for anything develop. He moves through rooms as if the rooms were built specifically for the path he chose to take. His eyes are the part that matches the portraits. You make the mistake of meeting them once on your second day, and you don't do it again. Your new supervisor is a man called Riva, former military, special operations background, face that has been rearranged at least once by something that wasn't a fist. Reva doesn't run through a briefing with you. He walks with you for 2 hours through every room, every corridor, every entrance and exit point of the inner residential wing, and he talks the entire time in a low, flat voice that carries exactly as far as he wants it to, and no further. He tells you what your eyes are for which directions, which hands, which doors. He tells you what your ears are for the change in his breathing, the particular silence that comes before he's about to say something to someone in private, the sound of a room shifting when his mood does. He tells you once, with no drama and no repetition, that your opinions about anything you see or hear in this building are to be stored somewhere that will never be accessed again. He taps his temple when he says this. He doesn't smile. Neither do you. The access changes everything. You had thought that being close to him would make things clearer, that proximity would resolve the mystery of what kind of man he actually is. Strip away the propaganda and the fear and reveal something true underneath. It does the opposite. The closer you are, the more versions of him you accumulate, and the less any of them explain the others. There is the version that tells a joke at dinner, genuinely funny, the kind of joke that makes his staff laugh with what appears to be real warmth. There is the version that takes a phone call and becomes, within 30 seconds, something so cold it changes the temperature of the room. There is the version that asks about your family. He asks, once, in a corridor, briefly, and it is not a threatening question, and somehow that makes it worse. There is the version you see through a half-open door one night, sitting alone, not doing anything, just sitting. And the expression on his face in that moment is not what you expected, and you close the door and stand in the corridor and breathe. You carry his secrets now. This is not a metaphor. You are present for things that are never written down, never recorded, never acknowledged in any official channel. A conversation with a general that ends with the general leaving the room looking like a man who has just understood his own situation for the first time. A document reviewed and signed over a meal like it is a restaurant receipt. A name mentioned in passing, just a name, no context, and then, weeks later, that name is gone from the world in the way that Tobak was gone from the schedule, clean and total, and unreferred to. You were in the room. You were 6 feet away. You are a witness to something that has no witnesses officially, and the gap between those two things is where you now live. The fear is structural. It doesn't spike, it doesn't come in waves you can ride out and recover from. It is load-bearing. It holds up your entire understanding of your days. You are afraid in the way that buildings are under stress, not visibly, not dramatically, just constantly, with everything depending on the integrity of materials being pushed in directions they weren't designed for. You are afraid of making a mistake. You are afraid of being too good at this, of becoming indispensable, of being pulled deeper, of learning things that require more permanent solutions than a transfer. You are afraid of his moods in the same way you would be afraid of weather in a place with no shelter. You are afraid, sometimes late at night, of yourself, of how smoothly you have adapted, of how natural the silence has become, of how you can stand in a room where something wrong is happening and keep your eyes at the correct angle, and your face at the correct setting and feel, on a surface level, nothing. There is a man, the detail named Foss, who has been in the inner circle for 6 years. 6 years. You study Foss the way a new prisoner studies the man who's been inside the longest. Foss is excellent at the job, fast, quiet, anticipatory, in a way that seems almost supernatural, until you realize it's just the product of 6 years of reading one man's patterns. But there is something in Foss that has been compressed, not broken, compressed, like something that used to take up more space and has been slowly, consistently, pressed down into a smaller and smaller shape. When you look at Foss, you are looking at a possible future, and you have not yet decided how you feel about it. You don't talk about quitting. Not because you'd be punished for the conversation, maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't, but because quitting has stopped being a real concept. There is no outside anymore. Not really. You go home between shifts technically. You sleep in your own bed, but you carry the compound with you. Everywhere. You carry his eyes and Reva's voice and the names mentioned in passing that disappear from the world. You carry it in the way your body tenses at certain sounds, in the way you've stopped answering certain questions from the people you love, in the way you've begun to understand, fully and without any remaining denial, that you are not guarding a man, you are part of a system. And the system does not have an exit, it only has levels. And somewhere, further in, further down, past Riva and past Foss and past every corridor you've memorized, there is another level still, and the only way you'll ever see it is if he decides you're ready. And the only way he decides you're ready is if you keep doing exactly what you're doing, standing close, seeing everything, saying nothing, becoming exactly what this place needs you to become.